Kia ora te whānau, you karaiti ko Andrew Doubledare. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 25th of August 2024. And it's Mark chapter 7 verses 1 through to 8, verses 14 through to 16 and 21 to 23. So we pick up the narrative at the beginning of Mark's Gospel, the 7th chapter. Now, when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe: the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles, and dining couches. Now I just add that in there because I discovered that there are a lot of early texts that actually have that phrase in there. So we've just thrown it in. So the Pharisees and scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the traditions of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honour me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition." Verse 14. Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." Verse 21. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. In my early teen years, our family joined a Open Brethren assembly in Dunedin. And I became close with the family of the lead elder. The boys were of a similar age to me, and as the years went on we developed similar interests, mainly around motor cars. We're a bit of petrol heads, and they were a great family, and I became often very much part of their household. They were very welcoming. On Saturday mornings, the father, who, as I said, was the senior elder, he would wash and polish his car. Now, I get it. It was a beautiful car. It was a 1964, I think, Mercedes-Benz 220 SE. It was a beautiful car. And he would wash it, he would polish it, he would dust it, he would vacuum clean it pretty well every Saturday. And there was an expression that I heard, I think, quite a lot. It was partly as a joke, but I think also partly serious. And it was, "Cleanliness is next to godliness." Now here's the thing. For brethren, you'd expect that that would be somewhere in the Bible. Well, it actually isn't, though it sounds like the sort of thing that should be. But there it was. And I remember hearing this, I think, quite a lot. It became part of my psyche, that cleanliness is next to godliness. Now, I don't know if it's got anything to do with that, but I know for me that eating with dirty hands, putting food in my house, in my mouth, is anathema to me. It's not that I can't pick up things like pastries and stuff like that and eat without washing first, but I would never dream of having petted or worked with a dog, or having just been to the toilet and not having washed my hands before I ate, or being out working in the garden or on the car or something like that. It's deeply ingrained in me, this concept that cleanliness is next to godliness. And so when I'm reading what's happening in this story, I'm kind of thinking, actually, Jesus is on the wrong side of microbiology and maybe of history as well, sticking up for his disciples. I'm kind of more with the Pharisees and the Jewish people of the time, because after all, cleanliness is next to godliness. Here's the thing though. This is something which is still very prevalent in our society. And now we have ourselves being bombarded on television and through the advertising media with antimicrobial soaps which promise to kill 99% of all germs. When you read the bottle, it'll tell you that it'll kill the SARS-2 virus and all these things if they're on hard surfaces. So we know that they're going to protect us. We know that they're going to look after us. We know that we're going to be fine. Except that we're not. What we know is that a lot of these high-end soaps should really be preserved for the things where they're really needed. You know, in operating theatres and places like that. Because what's happening is that because so many people are using these things, we're lowering our immunity. And we're also encouraging the advent of superbugs with which we've got nothing to deal. It seems that we need to eat a certain amount of dirt in order to be healthy. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? So, here's the thing. What's Jesus doing here? I want to suggest he's pointing us to the reality that spending all our energy in focusing on what's to avoid, dirt, that where we do that, we end up being defined by the dirt, whatever we imagine it to be. We become people who are defined as people who look to dealing with that particular kind or brand or type of dirt. And we can see this in issues here of personal hygiene. It's about our fear of dirt, about our fear of the unclean. We see it in the way that we deal with human sexuality. Again, it's about our fear of dirt, our fear of those we consider unclean. We see it in our responses to demons, to demonology, our fear of the unclean. The reality is that much of the church is living in a kind of purity culture. Now, you've probably heard those words, but I think it's more than just about teenagers. I think it actually goes across the breadth of the church. Because where there's evidences of dirt that we need to avoid or to repudiate or to cast out, we have moved from cleanliness is next to godliness to cleanliness is godliness. Just think about it for a moment. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It means it's very close. Sometimes it just doesn't take much of a nudge. And there we are, somehow believing that our cleanliness is a sign of our godliness. So what do? We put huge amounts of energy into avoiding dirt and being unclean. And then Jesus, as he's observing this, as he's heard the criticism of his disciples by the religious leaders, he asks them to consider their own dirt, the dirt on the inside, that which others rarely see. And he's moving us beyond mere appearance management, where we're making sure that we look clean, making sure that we avoid dirt, making sure we condemn the dirt where we see it, especially when we see it in others, and pointing out that while we're looking at these externals, because that's what they are, ensuring that the outside is clean, because cleanliness has now become godliness, we're missing out on a whole lot of other things, which are also ultimately unclean and evidences of dirt. What does he say? He says, for it's from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these things come from within, and they defile a person. Now, hopefully we're not doing all of these things, or even any of them. Yet my hunch is that Jesus is telling us that while we're spending so much energy on trying to be pure, there's a whole lot of things that we're going to be missing. We're just not going to see them all. Because where cleanliness is godliness, we're always going to mess up somewhere. So, as I sit with the sweep of the Gospels, as I hear Jesus across that sweep, inviting us into a positive embrace of life, I hear his call to obey the first two commandments: love God and love your neighbour as yourself. I hear him asserting that those who have obeyed this have obeyed the whole law. I hear his offering a new commandment: love one another as he has loved us, in a generous, forgiving, self-sacrificial way, where we seek the highest and best good of one another, of those around him. I want to suggest that rather than obsess with purity, with being the morality police, particularly for others, yet while being blind to our own faults, that Jesus is inviting us to move into a positive ethic of pursuing Christ-likeness, loving as he loves, responding to others with generosity and compassion, seeking the highest and best, and lifting others up rather than finding fault and dragging them down. The reality is that this purity culture is counterfeit Christianity. It keeps our attention away from the call of the gospel. It keeps us obsessed with the faults of others and ultimately with our own, keeping us less, keeping us small, keeping us diminished, because in the end we cannot escape from ourselves. This is a deception. It's a distraction. It's something that keeps our focus away from the core of who Jesus is and what Jesus invites us, nay, calls us into, where we reflect the heart of Jesus, the heart that seeks our highest and best, his for us and ours for others. Life, says Jesus, life in its abundance is what he yearns for each of us. Life fully embraced, life fully and generously experienced, life fully lived. Amen. God bless you.